The first charge appeared while I was standing in line at the grocery store. $42.16 at a gas station across town. I stared at my banking app in confusion. Then instinctively reached into my purse and touched my wallet. My card was still there. I remember that detail very clearly because, for one ridiculous second, I actually wondered if I had somehow forgotten buying gas. At 69, you begin checking yourself before you question reality. That is one of the cruel little tragedies of aging. You lose certainty before you lose memory. The cashier asked if I was ready to pay. I apologized distractedly and inserted my card into the machine. Declined, I frowned. That's strange. I tried again, declined. People behind me shifted impatiently. My face grew hot. Finally, I used a different card and left quickly, pretending not to notice the cashier watching me with polite concern. Concern. That word would come to haunt me over the following weeks. Inside my car, I opened the banking app again. Another charge had appeared, $18.73 at a convenience store, 5 minutes earlier. My stomach tightened. Someone was actively using my account. Right now, I immediately locked the card through the app, then I called the bank. After 23 minutes on hold, a tired-sounding man named Kevin answered. I think someone copied my debit card, I explained quickly. He typed for a moment, then paused. Mrs. Delaney, are you currently traveling? No. Interesting. Interesting is never a comforting word from a bank employee. There are multiple verified purchases happening today. Yes, that's the problem. No, he said slowly. I mean verified. My chest tightened. What does that mean? The transactions were approved using your device authorization. I stared at the dashboard through the windshield. My what? Your phone authentication. I looked down at my phone instinctively. That's impossible. Kevin hesitated carefully. The purchases were confirmed through your mobile banking app. My hands went cold. I was holding the phone. How? Another pause. Do you share account access with anyone? No. Then immediately. Well, my son helped me set up online banking last year. There it was, Daniel, my son. Kevin continued typing. There's a secondary device linked to the account. The world seemed to slow around me. What secondary device? A tablet registered under the same authorization profile. Tablet. Daniel owned a tablet. I suddenly remembered him sitting beside me months earlier helping simplify my banking setup after I forgot one password. At the time, I felt grateful. Now I felt sick. I want all access removed immediately, I said quietly. Kevin hesitated again. I may need verbal confirmation from the joint management contact. The room disappeared around me. Joint what? Your son is listed as secondary account assistance. I gripped the steering wheel harder. I never agreed to that. It was authorized last November. Right after my surgery, I had been heavily medicated for nearly 2 weeks after a hip replacement. Daniel handled paperwork during recovery, insurance forms, passwords, bills. God help me, I trusted him completely. I want him removed. Kevin lowered his voice slightly. Mrs. Delaney, are you certain? The notes indicate cognitive support concerns. The sentence hit like ice water. Cognitive support, not financial convenience, not family assistance. Support. Medical language hidden inside banking systems. I don't have cognitive problems. Of course. Not agreement. Pacifying, I knew that tone now. I closed my eyes briefly. What exactly do the notes say? Silence. Then carefully, occasional memory confusion involving financial management. My heartbeat slowed strangely. Not panic, recognition. Someone had already started building a story around me, and apparently the bank believed it. I drove home shaking with anger, not confusion, not embarrassment, anger. The moment I entered the house, I went directly to the desk in the hallway where I kept financial papers. The drawer was slightly open. I stopped breathing for a second. Not because the drawer itself mattered, because I suddenly noticed how many tiny things had felt wrong lately. Mail already opened before I saw it. Bills paid unusually early. Daniel insisting on helping organize my finances after surgery. Little acts of assistance, little transfers of control. I searched through the drawer quickly. Bank statements, insurance papers, retirement documents. Then I found something I had never seen before. A printed loan statement, my name at the top. $48,000 personal credit line, my vision blurred. No, I sat down slowly. The loan had been opened 3 months earlier. Monthly withdrawals already made. The signature at the bottom resembled mine enough to make me physically ill. I stared at the numbers while my pulse pounded heavily in my ears. $48,000. I had never requested a loan in my life. The front door suddenly opened. Daniel. He stopped immediately when he saw the paperwork in my hands. For one long second, neither of us spoke. Then softly, carefully, "Mom," that careful voice again, always careful now. I lifted the papers slightly. "What is this?" His expression changed almost invisibly, not surprise, calculation. "You weren't supposed to find that yet." The room went completely silent. Yet. Not ever, yet. I stared at my son in complete disbelief. "What did you just say?" Daniel closed the front door slowly behind him. "I didn't mean it like that." "Then explain it." He looked exhausted suddenly. Older, but not guilty. That was what frightened me most. People who know they are doing something wrong usually panic when exposed. Daniel looked like a man frustrated by bad timing. He walked carefully into the kitchen and set his keys down. "Mom, please sit down." "No." His jaw tightened slightly. "We need to talk calmly." Calmly, always calmly. As though emotion itself disqualified me from understanding my own life. I held up the loan papers. "You opened a $48,000 credit line in my name. It's not exactly a loan." I almost laughed. "Then what exactly is $48,000? "It was temporary financial restructuring." Restructuring, not theft, not fraud, financial restructuring. I suddenly realized Daniel had learned to translate reality into softer language years ago. "You forged my signature. You authorized me to help manage things after surgery. Not this." He rubbed his forehead tiredly. "You were overwhelmed. I had a hip replacement. You forgot bills, missed payments, got confused about passwords. I forgot one password, one important password. There it was. The same pattern again. One ordinary human mistake expanded into evidence of decline. I stared at him carefully. "What exactly did you tell the bank?" Daniel hesitated. Then carefully, "That you needed assistance handling financial matters temporarily." Temporarily. My stomach tightened. "Why are there notes about cognitive support?" Silence. "Then the bank recommended adding safeguards." Safeguards, another harmless word turned poisonous. "You told them I was mentally impaired." No one used those words. No. Because they never needed to. That was the terrifying part. The implication did all the work quietly. I walked toward the kitchen slowly. "How long have you been using my account?" "Mom, how long?" Another pause. "A few months." Months, not one emergency, not one desperate mistake. A process. Planned, maintained, hidden. I opened the banking app again. Another charge appeared. $312 electronics purchase. My voice came out dangerously quiet. "You're still spending from the account." Daniel looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "It's complicated." "No," I said softly. "It's criminal." That word finally hit him. I saw it immediately. His expression hardened slightly. "Mom, be careful." The sentence chilled me, not because he sounded threatening, because he sounded defensive, like a man protecting a narrative already built. "I used the money for the family." The family. Always the family, never him. "What family expenses require a secret loan in your mother's name?" Daniel looked away. That was answer enough. Debt. Immediately I knew, not because he told me, because suddenly everything fit. The constant stress lately. The late-night phone calls, the arguments between him and his wife Megan. I remembered overhearing part of a conversation at Christmas. "We're running out of options." At the time, I pretended not to hear. Now I wished I had listened more carefully. "You're in financial trouble." His silence confirmed it. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table because my legs suddenly felt weak. "How bad?" Daniel stayed standing. "Temporary setbacks." Daniel, finally, he exhaled heavily. The business investment collapsed. Business investment. He and his friend Tyler had opened some online logistics company 2 years earlier. I barely understood what they actually did. Something involving warehouse distribution software. Richard always distrusted it. Too risky, he used to say. How much do you owe? Daniel looked toward the window instead of at me. Enough, enough, interesting answer. Not manageable, not small. Enough, my chest tightened painfully. So you decided to use my identity. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. There it was, the justification, not selfishness, necessity. People become terrifying once they convince themselves survival excuses betrayal. I looked down at the loan statement again. Then another detail caught my eye. Monthly payments had already begun withdrawing automatically from my retirement account. I stopped breathing for a second. My retirement. The money Richard and I spent 40 years building. Quietly draining away while I thought my finances were normal. You've been stealing from me. Daniel's face changed immediately. No, what else should I call it? I intended to repay everything. Intended. Future intentions used to excuse present violations. I suddenly remembered Kevin's voice at the bank. Cognitive support concerns. This had gone far beyond financial desperation. Daniel had not only accessed my accounts, he had prepared explanations in advance. The same way families prepare medical narratives before legal intervention. You told the bank I was confused so they wouldn't question your access. Daniel said nothing. That silence told me everything. I stood again slowly. How many people believe I can't manage my own finances? His eyes lifted sharply. Mom, how many? The bank only flagged concerns because you called upset today. Upset, again, not robbed, not betrayed, upset, like emotional reaction itself proved instability. I laughed once softly. It sounded broken even to me. You know what's amazing? Daniel stayed silent. If I calmly question this, I'm suspicious. If I get angry, I'm unstable. If I panic, I'm confused. He looked genuinely miserable now, but misery did not erase what he had done. I was trying to protect you from stress. No, I whispered. You were protecting yourself. The room stayed silent for several long seconds. Then Daniel quietly admitted the thing I think he had been avoiding saying even to himself. I thought if the business recovered quickly, you'd never need to know. There it was, the fantasy, temporary theft, temporary lies, temporary control. Until suddenly months pass and systems start adapting around the deception. I picked up the loan papers again. What happens if I report this? Daniel went completely still. Not angry, not emotional. Afraid, real fear at last. Then softly, the bank may investigate your competency too. The room turned cold around me. What? They'll ask why you didn't notice the account changes earlier. I stared at him. They may review the cognitive support notes. There it was, the trap, the same trap every time. A narrative built quietly enough becomes self-protecting. By the time victims discover it, defending themselves already sounds suspicious. Daniel lowered his voice carefully. Mom, if this becomes legal, they're going to question both of us. Both of us, as though we shared responsibility equally. I suddenly understood something horrifying. He had not only stolen my identity, he had slowly attached doubt to mine. That night, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table until nearly dawn, surrounded by bank papers, old statements, and handwritten notes. For the first time in my life, I was afraid to trust my own financial memory. Not because I believed I was confused, because Daniel had spent months quietly teaching systems to interpret confusion around me. That changes something inside a person. You begin double-checking yourself constantly. Did I approve this? Did I forget that conversation? Did I sign something after surgery? Fear spreads fastest through uncertainty. At 6 in the morning, I called my daughter Emily. Not because we were especially close lately, because Emily distrusted Daniel instinctively, always had. When she arrived an hour later carrying coffee, one look at my face made her expression harden immediately. What happened? I handed her the loan papers silently. She read the first page. then the second, then slowly sat down. That son of a bitch. The bluntness almost made me cry from relief, not because she defended me, because she sounded certain, not careful, not concerned. Certain, I explained everything. The bank, the cognitive support notes, the secondary device access, the spending. Emily listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she leaned back slowly. He planned this. The sentence hung heavily in the kitchen. Yes, not emotional panic, not misunderstanding, planning. Emily tapped the loan papers. He's been moving money for months. I nodded quietly. He said the business collapsed. It did. I looked up sharply. You knew, Emily laughed bitterly. Everyone knew except you. The room went silent. Daniel borrowed money from half the family last winter. My stomach tightened. How much? Tens of thousands. I suddenly remembered Rachel mentioning casually that Daniel seemed stressed lately. At the time, I thought she meant ordinary adult stress. Now I realized the family had been quietly orbiting financial disaster for months while I remained outside the conversation. Emily looked toward me carefully. You know what scares me most? What? He didn't just steal money. No, he stole legitimacy. That was worse. The cognitive notes, the account assistance, the support concerns. He built a framework where questioning the fraud already made me appear unstable. Emily opened the banking app on my phone carefully. Show me every transaction. We spent nearly 3 hours going through statements, and slowly the pattern emerged. Small transfers first, tiny purchases, harmless-looking charges. Then larger withdrawals, electronics, hotel stays, business payments, debt repayments. The deeper we looked, the sicker I felt. At one point, Emily stopped scrolling suddenly. What is this? I leaned closer. Monthly payments to an assisted financial management service. My chest tightened instantly. What is that? Emily clicked the details. Then both of us went silent. The service description included Senior Financial Oversight Assistance. Senior, Oversight, Assistance, always soft words hiding something harder underneath. Emily looked horrified. He enrolled you in elder financial supervision, without my consent, without my knowledge. I suddenly remembered Daniel insisting after surgery that automatic monitoring systems would make things safer while I recovered. At the time, heavily medicated and exhausted, I signed several digital forms without reading carefully. God help me. I trusted my son. Emily looked at me carefully now. Mom, how much paperwork did you sign after surgery? I searched my memory slowly. Insurance forms, medication releases, rehabilitation documents, so many papers, so much medication. The perfect environment for manipulation. I don't know. And for the first time since this began, those words genuinely frightened me, not because I was declining. Because exhaustion and trust together make people vulnerable at any age. Emily squeezed my hand gently. This isn't your fault. I looked down at the statements. Maybe not. But shame still settled heavily inside me. Not shame for aging. Shame for trusting too completely. At noon, my phone rang. Daniel, I stared at it without answering. Then another call. Then a text. Please talk to me before Emily convinces you to overreact. Overreact. Interesting word considering he forged financial access and opened loans in my name. Emily laughed coldly reading the message. He still thinks this is manageable. No, he thought the narrative was manageable, not the theft itself, the interpretation of it. Then another text arrived. The bank's fraud department may freeze your accounts during investigation. Think carefully. I stared at the screen. Fear, there it was, not apology, not accountability, fear management. He was still trying to guide my reactions instead of facing reality. Emily took my phone gently. He's panicking. Good. No, she said quietly. Panicked people become dangerous. That sentence stayed with me all afternoon. At 3, we met with Elaine Porter, the same attorney who handled Richard's estate years earlier. She listened carefully while reviewing the statements and loan documents. Unlike the bank employees, she never once used careful tones or concerned smiles. She looked angry immediately. Mrs. Delaney, this is fraud. The directness almost shocked me. Elaine tapped the cognitive support notes. And this is strategic. Strategic, exactly, not accidental, not emotional, purposeful. He created institutional explanations before discovery, Elaine continued. That's extremely important. I looked at her quietly. You mean he prepared for me noticing? Yes. The room went silent, because hearing another person say it aloud transformed suspicion into reality. Elaine leaned back slightly. The moment someone attaches competency concerns to financial systems, victims become less credible automatically. Exactly. That was the horror, not just the theft. The erosion of trust surrounding my objections. Elaine continued reviewing documents for another 10 minutes before suddenly pausing. What? She turned one page toward me slowly. The blood drained from my face instantly. An emergency conservatorship consultation request. Not filed, prepared, my name printed at the top. Reason for concern: financial confusion, emotional instability, difficulty managing assets independently. I stared at the page in disbelief. Daniel had already started preparing legal control options. Not just financial access. Authority, Emily whispered, "Oh my God." Elaine's expression darkened. He was building leverage. Leverage, not family, not protection, control. I sat completely still. Then another realization hit me. The spending, the loans, the hidden access. Daniel had not only needed money, he needed time. And the easiest way to buy time was making everyone believe his mother could no longer understand what was happening. Elaine contacted the bank's fraud division the next morning. By noon, my accounts were frozen temporarily. Daniel called 17 times. I counted. Not because I wanted to, because every missed call felt like pressure vibrating through the house. Emily stayed with me that afternoon while Elaine handled paperwork remotely. At around 4, someone knocked hard on the front door. Not politely. Urgently. Daniel. The moment I opened the door, I barely recognized him. His hair looked disheveled, eyes bloodshot, face pale from lack of sleep. For the first time since this nightmare began, he did not sound calm. "You froze the accounts," I stared at him. "You opened a fraudulent loan in my name. That money was keeping everything afloat." There it was, not denial anymore, justification. Emily stepped into the hallway behind me immediately. "You need to leave." Daniel ignored her completely. "Mom, if the fraud investigation moves forward, they'll examine all your financial records." I almost laughed. "That's generally how investigations work. You don't understand." No. He did not understand anymore. The careful narrative he built was collapsing, and now he sounded desperate instead of strategic. "I understand perfectly," I said quietly. "You attached competency concerns to my banking profile so nobody would question your access." Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. Nothing ever is." That is how boundaries disappear, one compromise at a time. Emily crossed her arms. "How much debt are you actually in?" Daniel stayed silent. Then finally, 212,000. The number landed heavily in the hallway. I stopped breathing for a second. Not 40,000, not 60,000, $200,000. My son looked suddenly smaller standing there. Not younger, smaller. A frightened man drowning quietly for so long he started believing survival justified betrayal. "When did it become this bad?" I asked softly. He looked away. "About a year ago." A year, meaning he began planning this long before my surgery. The surgery only created opportunity. That realization hurt more than the money itself. "You chose me because I trusted you." His face crumpled slightly. "Mom, no, tell the truth." Silence. Then quietly, "You were the only person who still could." The sentence hollowed something inside me, not because it was cruel, because it was honest. Emily looked physically sick now. "You manipulated her recovery." Daniel's voice broke slightly. "I was trying to save my family." There it was again. Fear, not greed alone, fear mixed with desperation. That combination creates monsters ordinary people never imagine themselves becoming. I stepped back slowly. "And now?" Daniel looked completely exhausted. "If the accounts stay frozen, everything collapses." Everything, not my finances, his life. I suddenly realized the terrifying truth underneath all of this. He had slowly tied his survival to my silence. Elaine called while Daniel was still standing in the hallway. I answered immediately. Her voice sounded sharp. "Mrs. Delaney, you need to know something." My stomach tightened. "What?" The conservatorship consultation wasn't only prepared. The room went silent. "It was discussed formally with a legal advisor last month." I stared directly at Daniel. His face drained completely. "What kind of discussion?" I asked quietly. Elaine paused. "The advisor declined moving forward without stronger medical documentation." Medical documentation. That was why the banknotes existed. The cognitive concerns. The financial confusion records. He had been building evidence, not to help me, to protect himself once discovery became unavoidable. Emily whispered, "Jesus Christ." Daniel sat down heavily on the porch step like his legs stopped working. Then finally, for the first time since this began, he told the complete truth. The business partners were threatening legal action. Neither of us spoke. I thought if I could stabilize things before anyone noticed. His voice shook slightly. "I could repay everything. Repay everything. Undo betrayal with future success. The fantasy desperate people cling to before reality crushes them." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I never wanted you hurt." And somehow I believed him. That was the tragedy, not cruelty, cowardice. Cowardice powerful enough to slowly destroy trust while pretending to protect everyone. Elaine continued speaking through the phone. "There's something else." I closed my eyes briefly. "What now?" "The bank's internal notes include references to possible memory decline dating back 8 months. 8 months. My surgery happened 6 months ago." I slowly looked at Daniel again. "You started this before surgery." He said nothing. That silence answered everything. The careful questions about passwords, the offers to help with bills. The comments about me seeming more forgetful lately. Seeds. He planted seeds long before he needed the money urgently. Because once people begin quietly questioning an older person's competence, future control becomes much easier. Daniel covered his face with both hands. "I hated myself every day." Maybe he did. But self-hatred does not protect victims. I suddenly felt unbearably tired. Not angry anymore, just tired. Tired of narratives. Tired of careful language. Tired of defending obvious reality against systems already prepared to doubt me. Elaine's voice softened slightly. "Mrs. Delaney, we can stop this fully now. But you need to decide whether this remains civil or becomes criminal." The question hung heavily in the air. "Criminal, my son." Emily looked at me carefully but said nothing. Daniel finally lifted his head slowly. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he stopped defending himself. No careful explanations, no strategic language, no emotional manipulation. Just truth. "If you report everything," he whispered, "I deserve it." The honesty of that sentence nearly broke me, because suddenly he sounded like my son again. Not the man who built systems around my confusion, not the frightened stranger hiding loans inside my retirement account. Just my son, lost, ashamed, terrified. And standing there in the doorway of my own house, I realized the cruelest part of all. He had spent so long preparing everyone to doubt me that he forgot how much damage it would do once he finally needed someone to believe him instead. I did not send Daniel to prison. Some people would have, maybe some people should have. But when I looked at my son sitting on the porch with his face buried in his hands, I did not see a criminal mastermind. I saw a frightened man who kept making one terrible decision after another because he became convinced he could fix everything tomorrow. Tomorrow is dangerous. People destroy entire lives protecting futures that never arrive. The bank investigation continued anyway. Fraud departments do not disappear because mothers still love their children. Over the following weeks, every account, transfer, signature, and authorization was reviewed carefully. And slowly, the truth emerged completely. Daniel had indeed manipulated banking systems using cognitive support concerns. He had added secondary device access. He had opened the credit line. He had transferred money repeatedly. But Elaine also proved something equally important. There had never been any real evidence I could not manage my finances independently. No missed mortgage payments, no reckless spending, no unpaid taxes, no legitimate confusion, only narrative, small comments repeated often enough to create institutional doubt. The bank quietly removed every competency-related note attached to my profile after Elaine threatened legal action. That mattered to me almost more than the money itself. Because money can be recovered, identity is harder. For months, every conversation around my finances carried invisible suspicion underneath it. And once people begin treating you like someone fragile, part of you starts moving carefully too. That was the damage I hated most. Not the loan, not the theft, the hesitation it planted inside me. For weeks afterward, every time I forgot a password or misplaced paperwork, panic flashed through me instantly. What if he was right? What if I missed signs myself? Then I would stop, breathe. And remember something important. Healthy people make mistakes too. Aging is not incompetence. Stress is not confusion. Trust is not weakness. But fear can transform all three into evidence very quickly. Daniel eventually confessed everything formally to the bank, not because he suddenly became noble. Because the lies became too large to maintain once the systems started unraveling. The business had collapsed nearly a year earlier after two major contracts failed simultaneously. He refinanced debt quietly, borrowed from relatives, used credit cards, lied to Megan repeatedly about how bad things really were. Then came my surgery, a perfect opportunity, pain medication. Paperwork, recovery confusion, digital authorizations, temporary access became permanent temptation. And once he realized how easily institutions accepted support concerns involving older adults, he kept going. That part haunted me deeply, not just my son's choices, how easy the system made them. A few careful phrases, a worried tone, a suggestion of forgetfulness, and suddenly authority begins shifting away from older people quietly, almost invisibly. Megan came to see me about a month later. She looked thinner, exhausted. For a while we simply sat together drinking tea in silence. Then softly she admitted, "I believed him." I nodded. "I know. He kept saying you were becoming more forgetful." Forgetful, such a small word, such a dangerous one. Megan looked down at her cup. "When you repeated stories or forgot little things, it started sounding convincing." Of course it did. Because older people are allowed fewer imperfections before others become suspicious. Young people lose keys and laugh. Older people lose keys and families exchange worried looks. That truth settled heavily between us. Megan wiped her eyes quietly. "I should have questioned things sooner." "Yes," I said honestly, not cruelly, just honestly, because love without questioning becomes dangerous very fast. Emily stayed close to me through all of it. Closer than we had been in years. One afternoon, while sorting paperwork together, I accidentally dropped an entire stack of bank forms onto the floor. For one terrible second, both of us froze. Not visibly, but I felt it, the instinctive fear. Then Emily suddenly burst out laughing, not mocking laughter, human laughter. "Oh my God," she said, kneeling beside the papers. "You dropped something. Somebody call the neurology department immediately." I laughed so hard I cried, because she understood. Finally, someone understood. Normal human imperfection had become terrifying inside this family. And humor was the first thing that made it human again. The criminal investigation eventually ended with a settlement agreement instead of prosecution. Daniel liquidated nearly everything he owned to repay the debt fully. The business disappeared. The partnerships collapsed. Most of his friendships vanished too. Consequences came anyway. They always do, even when prison doesn't. But the hardest consequence was something else entirely. Trust changed shape permanently between us. I still loved my son. That never disappeared. But love after betrayal becomes more conscious, more careful. Like touching a healed bone that still remembers breaking. Last Sunday, Daniel came over to help fix a leaking pipe beneath the kitchen sink. For nearly an hour, Things almost felt normal again. Then he casually asked for the Wi-Fi password because his phone disconnected. And for one brief, horrible moment, I hesitated, not because I thought he would steal from me again. Because my body remembered what my mind was still trying to forgive. Daniel noticed immediately. The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds, but both of us felt it completely. His face changed first. Pain. Recognition. Shame. Then quietly he said, "You can change it afterward if you want." That sentence nearly broke my heart, because in that moment I realized something important. The money was never the deepest loss. Trust is. Money returns through payments, settlements, paperwork. Trust returns through tiny moments stretched across years. And sometimes it never fully returns at all. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen thinking about everything that happened. The bank notes, the support concerns, the careful language. The quiet transfer of authority. All of it built around one terrifying assumption, that older people become less believable the moment confusion enters the conversation. That assumption almost destroyed my life. Yesterday morning, I logged into my bank account for the first time in weeks without feeling afraid. No suspicious charges, no hidden loans, no secondary devices, just my account again, my name, my control, my reality, such ordinary things. Yet I sat there staring at the screen for nearly 5 full minutes because I finally understood how fragile ordinary freedom actually is. Sometimes people do not steal your independence all at once. Sometimes they slowly surround it with enough doubt that eventually everyone starts treating your voice like the least reliable thing in the room.